Welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. Advice, thoughts, and stories from a married couple on cybersecurity, technology, and life in general. Now here are your hosts, Didi and Lital.
Hello and welcome to the Didi and Lital Show. It's another week. What's up, Didi?
Well, Drake May performed a lot better this time around than the previous time around. And it looks like we might have a quarterback. Jacoby Brissett threw that terrible pick in the end zone, which was like, oh my God, that thing sucked. It's clearly that we're going to have at least 8 games of suck before somebody starts asking questions. But Dave, what's your excitement level for football coming in?
I actually think the Patriots are going to win like 7 games, but I can revive. Everybody seems to think we're going to be terrible. Why can't we be better? We won 4 games last year. Why can't we be 3 games better? No,
because we lack Belichick. Belichick had he has his downsides. Like he always likes to be on the cheap. He has like no belief in talent. He drafted like shit for the last 10 years, but he still knows how to coach defense like nobody else.
Right. And the defense is strong. I'm upset about losing Judon because he was excellent, but I don't know. Are you thinking we're going to be basement again?
Oh, I think we are going to get the number 1 overall.
Okay.
I'm the bottom.
The number 1 overall pick means that you suck the most.
Right.
So right. I'm willing to take the number 1 bet any day.
Okay.
If I was a betting man, but okay. I'm not. Also, the excitement is high because there's like no hockey. Jaylen Brown is doing rap songs. It's clearly cucumber days of summer. It's dog days. Somebody needs to do something, and hopefully football will be that.
I hope so.
Yes. So there's a little bit of excitement on that one. And because it's so boring, I'm already doing the book club thing. And Yana and I have been discussing the difference between Margaret Atwood and the lady that wrote the 5th season, because both of them are dystopians, and both of them are kind of about somebody oppressing somebody, blah, blah, blah. Margaret Atwood from Handmaid's Tale.
Yep.
And one of the things I really don't like is when I get preached to. Handmaid's Tale is like a very, very thin book. If you want to write dystopia, write thin. Don't write tomes. So that's this is where I'm starting. And I think it leads us
to the topic of today with that dystopian.
Dystopian, how do you get to dystopia? And part of it is losing science. If science goes to the shitters.
Because science is supposed to be the truth.
Yes.
Believe in science, right?
Listen, I do believe in science.
We're both coming from science.
Yes. But I think a lot of people don't understand how the scientific process works. And Lital and I were listening to my usual YouTube.
A random YouTube that came up.
Mainly because when we cook and clean and do the stuff, we sit in the living room. There was a big TV in the living room that the designer decided to put there to watch football when football shows up. But that big TV occasionally pops up and does something random from YouTube. And this was a guy called Boghossian who is a philosopher, and he decided to see how many bullshit studies he can put together
that will actually persist.
Will
get published and will become a mainstream.
Yes. And he published something about the penis consensus, something like that.
It's about how size of penis is related to climate change and global warming. You cannot think of something more BS than that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
It was complete BS.
Male penises affect global warming.
Yes. And he was able to publish that thing and 12 other publications, including one in the biggest one in gender studies, that basically called out his own paper. He basically wrote under a pseudonym to make fun of himself. And said that
he worked very hard of getting it in and proving it. Like they created fake personalities, fake professors with a full kind of writing history.
Yeah.
They worked really hard on the project to make it appear legit.
Yes.
They basically Borated it. Like I feel like he is the Borat of science.
he did the Borat of science, and I sent it with friends, and a lot of them said this is impossible. No way that this is possible. And Lital and Lital and I said, hey, the index for scientific publication says otherwise, because clearly it was published, and there were rebuttals published, and blah blah blah. And you can see that some people even cited it. So it's clear that it's in. It's very, very much in. So people were asking, how is that possible? And by the way, it also, the other thing that wanted me to have this conversation is my buddy Martin called me yesterday. He and Nasif and a whole bunch of others that were in Blackhead came back with COVID. Surprise, surprise. Well,
we all know you go to a place with a lot of people, you get sick with something,
yes,
right?
But apparently, I didn't know that. Do you know that the CDC guidance have not changed about getting COVID? That you're supposed to isolate, you're supposed to wear a mask.
I think they removed it, didn't they?
He claims
the isolation and stuff. Is it still a thing?
He claims that it's still a thing. We need to ask Sigal to have confirmation.
I don't know. We can Google it, but whatever.
Yeah, but I would ask a real doctor about this. But if this is
again, it's about the science.
It's about the science. How come nobody has changed the science? It's about science and how science works. So. I decided to give a primer, and hopefully Lital will help me because I don't want another 45 minutes of Didi filibuster.
You like those?
Of course I like those.
Yeah?
But
the audience like it?
I don't know. I think the audience is here for you, not for me.
I don't know. Okay. I'll try to help.
So
you go.
So the idea of science, this is something that most people don't understand. I took a class that is probably one of the best classes I've ever taken. It was in the Open University. And it's called The Structure of Science Philosophy. And it talks about two core philosophers. It has a lot of side philosophers like the Platos and the Aristos and Kant and Emmanuel, not the... it has all the structure of all the core philosophers like, Hume and the Treatise of Failure of Induction. There's a whole bunch of the core ones, but they focus on two big ones. Karl Popper, and the other one is Thomas S. Kuhn. And the difference between the two are very, very distinct. Popper was a logic guy, like Wittgenstein and these guys, and he basically started with the core of the failure of the hypothesis. So you can't prove, you can disprove. There's no proof in science.
There is disproof of your hypothesis.
You put an hypothesis and you try as hard as you can to disprove it. And as long as you don't disprove it, this is the reigning hypothesis.
And that is, I think this is important. This is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about science. I think most people think science is, we put an hypothesis, X will cause Y, and we're going to prove that X caused Y. No, that's wrong, because when you're doing it, you get a lot of correlation, not causation.
Yep.
It's the opposite that you're trying to do. You're trying to gather as much information that your hypothesis that X causes Y is not true. Find those cases that when you do X, you don't get Y.
Yep.
And they say that if you get to that, obviously the hypothesis is not true. So the hypothesis is something that is standing for as long as you didn't prove otherwise.
Correct.
Meaning that the belief we currently have in science is hypothetical. Science, as at any moment, is hypothetical until proven different.
Yep.
And all science is built upon, at a certain point of time, we disprove the hypothesis and we move on to a new hypothesis, which can then also be disproven.
Correct.
So the move of science is not actually to prove the current beliefs. It's to disprove them. And I think this is what most people don't understand.
So
that's critical.
So yes, this is very critical. Also, the person that explains this the best is our buddy Nassim Taleb when he talks about black swans. Because he says, let's say you have an hypothesis that all swans are white. And if you've been in the northern hemisphere and you've counted every single swan before you got to Australia, you would have never seen a black swan. Ever. But you got to Australia and all your myths and stories break. Which is related a lot to Dima's last visit about myths and the disprovement of myths. Because everything that we believe in is a myth. So that was one way of viewing science. Which is the Karl Popper way, which was very prevalent in the 40s and blah, 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 and so on. Kuhn came in later on and basically said, yeah, that's BS. Why did he say that this is BS? He says that scientists are people, and the right way to view science is sociology. He says, yeah, there's like the real way of doing this, which is what Popper is talking about. But in reality, there's something called a paradigm, and people work within the paradigm. So we create an echo chamber, and the echo chamber kind of strengthens itself. And people need to work to break the paradigm, but most people work within the paradigm. They don't want to break the paradigm. Occasionally, an Einstein comes along. So if you think about physics, physics was basically pre-Newtonian, which was complete bullshit and non-existent, but it was Zeno and the Zeno paradox and all that stuff with the non-moving.
Then you get Galileo, and you get Newton.
But Newton basically defined and broke the pre-existing Greek and Archimedes-based paradigms. Archimedes and the Greeks basically put the foundations of the paradigm, and everybody worked within that paradigm until Newton came along and Galileo came along and Copernicus came along, and they broke the paradigm. And then a new paradigm was created.
The Newtonian.
Newtonian one. And that persisted for 300 years. And Einstein had to
and
work...
still is. In this framework.
It doesn't work. It just... You had to create a new paradigm, which was the Einstein relative motion, which basically showed that everything that Newtonian physics works in r speeds, but when you get to speed of light speeds, things need to be in the relative space. Same goes when you're small. And if Ted is listening to the joke, that's the famous joke about the cop pulling over an electron and asking him, do you know how fast you were going? And he says, no, but I know exactly where I am. So that's like for those that don't know, this is Heisenberg.
Relativity.
Yes. So that's a little bit of the science. But everything is inside a sociological construct of a paradigm.
Is it because, even though we would like to think that scientists want to get, big findings and break the rules and stuff, at the end of the day, most of them conform and actually don't want to go against the stream and find completely new stuff and have crazy ideas?
Yes. And here comes a new part. So there's also now the construct of the finance of science. The reason that I'm not a scientist, even though I'm a very inquisitive person and I really like sciences, especially life sciences, and I love the math.
And you spent time on your PhD.
I spent time on my PhD and did a lot of math. And as you know, I'm a math nerd. What I've discovered is that you need to kiss a shitload of asses in science, and beg for grants. Most of your work as a head of a lab has nothing to do with sciences. It has to deal with kissing ass and grabbing grants. And to kiss ass and grab grants, you need to conform to the
mainstream,
to the mainstream, to the paradigm. There's not a lot of things investing. This is, by the way, You know that I hate government and I hate everything that has to do with the government.
But if you want to get NIH grants,
forget the NIH grant. NIH grant, you need to kiss ass and beg forgiveness. They are the dumbest of them all. But DARPA, they are amazing. They are amazing. They're willing to fund things that make absolutely no sense, and they will fund a whole bunch of shit that is so ludicrous that it's like when they were talking about the men that stare at goats. They're willing to test anything.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
It's amazing. So besides DARPA, that basically you can go there and try to apply for things that are completely ludicrous.
Okay.
Because they're willing to put an X amount of money on bets that
even VCs not able to do.
Even VCs will never do.
Those are the big moonshots.
These are big moonshots, and occasionally, and most of the time, they fail miserably. But there's also a lot of progress that was created through those studies because people that were willing to really challenge the paradigms. Mm-hmm. A lot of the if we'll ever get fusion, it will come through those things. But the majority of people basically conform to the paradigm, and the way you progress in science is you need to have X amount of publications. And if you look at the publications in traditional science, like medicine, it's really hard to build level 3 double-blind study. It takes 8 years.
Can you explain level 3?
Yes. So first level of study, I'm talking about medicine, just medicine. In medicine, you do phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and phase 4. I forgot phase 4. Studies to approve a molecule for treatment. Phase 1 is usually the NIH.
Animal.
It's the NIH funded stuff that...
which is mostly animal.
It's mostly animal. It's basically finding the molecule and understanding the mechanics of the molecule. These are the phase 1 studies. And you understand that the molecule works on animal models.
Yeah.
Phase 2, and this is an important thing, is primarily safety studies. If we're talking about our world, in our world there's a concept called the ICP, the ideal customer profile. A drug has an ICP. So there are drugs that are supposed to treat
specific population, specific disease.
Most of them are sensitive populations.
So we need to see that it doesn't cause
like real
bad stuff.
Really bad shit. You try to give it to somebody that's sort of kind of may have the condition. So you do want to test towards the condition, but primarily the phase 2 are safety studies.
If they do 2 and 3 together, it's safety and efficacy, which sometimes happens.
They try not to do those things.
That's like the accelerated path, right?
Yes.
When you
but do you know who they do safety studies on?
I assume it's outside the US.
No, it's students. Dumb students will do everything. You say, hey, how about you take drugs to try? It's like, oh yeah, sure, dude. I'm gonna try everything. So they pay students and they try shit on them. Every person that didn't have a tech job in my medical school had shit experimented on them. And it's like a badge of honor. Almost all bioscience students get experimented on to one level.
Never got asked to do an experiment on myself.
That's because
even though I'm a bio.
That's because you're a rich oppressor. But
like you.
I'm from a long line of communists. What are you talking about? But the idea is that you test the safety, and then if you have an isolated molecule, you do something called a phase 3 study, which is efficacy, which is usually a double blind. What does it mean, double blind? It means that the patients don't know what they're getting.
And the person administering it don't know if they give them a placebo or the right thing.
And the reason that they give placebo is that they discovered
the placebo effect, which is a wonderful effect that even a patient getting saline when he is in terrible pain will think that he is treated with painkillers.
Exactly. So
just because he's being treated.
Exactly. So the placebo effect is something that needs to be taken care of, and that's the double-blind standard, and then that's the golden standard for every publication. The problem with that is that you can have one of these in your career, probably, And if you're building your whole career on a molecule that may or may not succeed, that's like, taking VC money and swinging for the bleachers. And most scientists don't want to do that. Most of them want to do small studies inside their labs, a little bit of the phase 2, a little bit of the...
that's what they can actually do in the day-to-day. Like, think about the amount of scientists you have, and they need to advance their career. How many research do they need to publish a year? What's the...
Usually you need to publish somewhere between 3 and 7.
3 and 7 papers a year?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a lot.
It's a shitload. So what do you publish if you need to publish a lot? Bullshit. You publish bullshit. And when I was working on in my academic stuff, a lot of the things that I did was to cluster studies that were published by small groups and basically show that there's publication bias, that the curves don't align. Because you can see that people that did a study that didn't conform with the paradigm just didn't publish it. They left it in the drawer because they knew that it will never get published.
Why would it never be published? If you did a study and you found something that doesn't conform with the norm, you don't even try to get it submitted? Nope. You don't submit it?
Nope. Most people will not submit it. So when I was doing...
Because they think... Is it because they think my finding is not true, I need to trash it? Or it's because of the not conforming with the norm, not going after, potential, crying for a paradigm shift?
So let's say I did a very small study about vitamin E.
Yep.
Which...
supposed to be very positive, very good,
yes.
Anti-cancer, whatever, after cardio. People used to take shit tons of vitamin E after any cardiovascular surgery, any of that. There was a belief that antioxidants will save you from whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was the belief, I think, in the 90s. That was very prevalent.
Yeah, but... Who paid for these studies?
I assume vitamin companies or whatever.
GNC and Solgar.
Okay.
They were. So, do you think that they would like a study published that shows
saying that it increases mortality?
Yeah. No, right?
Post surgery, of course not.
So that's if you think that drug companies pay for most of the studies, they have an incentive to not publish negative results, and this is in the most scientific part. Let's not even talk about social sciences.
No, we're in science. Yeah, real science.
We're in real science. And even there's a lot of publication bias. There's a lot of...
So you're finding, you're doing a research, you're finding that taking overdoses of vitamin E post-cardiovascular event or surgery increases mortality. You will just trash it.
Yep.
Because... you're afraid from what the sponsors of those things will say. You don't want to shake the tree. What is it?
There's a whole slew of things. There's the not shake the tree. There's also when I tried my first publication about the survey about the antioxidants,
which is what basically that's what you found, right? That vitamin E, especially with smokers and all, it becomes
problematic. But regardless, when you go with the paradigm, the likelihood of you publishing is 10 times greater. So if you think about publication and you need a massive number of publications, what do?
You go with you conform.
No, you do spray and pray.
Okay.
You publish things that people will want to publish.
Yeah.
And as many of them as you can. And that's...
So that also creates a bias towards the paradigm, because if you're creating 10 mini research about all conforming to the idea that overdosing on vitamin E is a good thing, then, the world is full of tons of research around that, and that must be true.
Yeah.
Not thinking that it's basically, the same set of, it's the same research again and again and again and again being submitted to different papers with a little bit of alteration. And, they take a little different group or look at it from a different angle, or
but you take the same population and you repeat over and over different hypotheses, even though things don't actually work out. Then there's something else. There's something called longitudinal studies.
Over time,
which sometimes you can do the study by, like the Framingham longitude study is amazing. It's the biggest cardio study in the world.
Basically, they followed up
a population for like 30-something years.
Yeah.
I think
looked at the habits and what happened to them.
But they had a very good cohort that they repeated and visited and retested and got a lot of statistics on.
That's extremely rare.
But it
actually, I think they had like the one best dietary kind of nutritional one done in Israel. Then they did it on employees of kind of manufacturing facility that kept on working there and they really controlled the food and stuff. And that's how they found the Mediterranean diet was the best.
But
that's interesting.
But the main challenge with those studies is it's also like the phase 4. The phase 4 for drug trials and the longitudinal studies is then you measure something in the population and see if you introduced a drug to the population, what would happen?
Right.
Or you express something. It's less reliable than a phase 3. But
because compliance with whatever you're doing over time drops because people have weird behaviors, because people don't necessarily report your data.
But
becomes not as quality.
But thanks to the phase 4, people find out about thalidomide, and things like that.
Yeah, this is where you actually see the bad stuff happening over time.
Over time. But it's an important thing, and those studies are also very important. But then you start declining in reliability. You do the longitudinal studies, you do the population studies. Basically, if somebody has a database, somebody has a query, they run to the database, they write a query, and they run an analysis on the hypothesis. And a lot of times people don't understand things like multiple comparisons and the repeat of the study. There's a lot of things that go wrong. And the main challenge with these things is something called non-repeatability. The thing that is most important about any scientific study is repeatability.
Especially if the study is about conforming to the norm, about, actually saying the hypothesis is right. You need to repeat it again and again and again, and not to disregard those results that show the opposite, that dispute the hypothesis.
Yes. And when you think about those things, now things become really, really interesting, because now you discover that all psychology is basically bullshit, because it's, or a non-science, or a non-exact science.
Not exact science, because it's very rare. There are a few areas in psychology in which there is strong reproducibility, but there are a lot of areas, for example, around economical behavior, behavioral sciences, and so that there is very little reproducibility of research.
And by the way, this is where I agree completely with Nassim Taleb. When you talk about economy, everybody puts economy in the exact sciences, and I think macroeconomy is bullshit. I think there's beautiful hypotheses in this, but it's a theory. It's a very loose theory, even though they're giving out Nobel Prizes for it like there's no tomorrow. We've seen that none of those actually were repeatable or maintainable over a long period of time, versus microeconomy, that supply and demand and all those things that have been true since the time of Adam Smith. So
they're repeatable every day we see them.
Repeatable. Supply and demand repeats itself every time you see this. So this is like the basics of economics have not changed forever, but the macro has changed all the time, and I think it's an important thing to think through. I think the fact that people were willing to get out of the idea of zero-sum game is an important thing. There's a million things that are good in this, but you need to understand that it's not the same as the science that builds atom bombs, or the science that gives you medication. So
that's why you can have a scientific paper saying that penis causes...
Now that's even...
climate change.
Even this becomes even more problematic. By the way, whenever I talk about climate change, everybody assumes that I'm a Trump supporter, MAGA guy, and don't believe in global warming. There is global warming. We've been in Massachusetts for 12 years. When we came in, it was terrible. The winters were horrible. And the fact is that look at our pictures in the last 12 years going to Sunday River in the winter, and you'll see that there's less and less snow in Christmas. And if somebody doesn't believe me, luckily enough, there's enough data about this that you can look it up. So
I think the main debate that needs to be is what are the deal? Let's not get into it. Let's not get into it. I don't know why you brought that.
I brought this up to say why I have problems with the climate change studies is because I'm a math guy. And when I see bad math and bad science, I call it out.
Yeah, I think it's an episode of its own.
I think
we have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about this topic.
We can probably have another conversation about climate change, but I can tell you that there's a lot of bad science there. A lot of bad science.
I agree.
And most of it is because of the need to repeat the echo chamber that there's a crisis. And same goes for psychology.
This is where, it is more of politics than science.
Exactly. So, and this is where you see things like gender studies, which are an important studies on their own, but you can't be an echo chamber. And you need
science should not be for an agenda. It needs to be, let's observe phenomenons. Let's prove or disprove that those phenomenons happen. Yep. If it comes with a political agenda, for me, it's not science. I'm sorry.
Of course.
It's a political thing. It's, maybe it needs to belong in with humanities. That is fine.
Even with humanities.
It could be a theory. It's not science.
Even with humanities, there needs to be diligence. If you're willing to, if everybody thinks the same way, this is how the Dark Ages worked. That everybody thought the same way. You can't think the same way. Otherwise, you're not willing to grow and change.
Yep.
And one of the things that is happening in a lot of the looser sciences, as they grow apart from the stricter sciences, you'll see that they still have those obligations to publish. They still need to get those grants. They need to be promoted based on those publications. And my likelihood to publish, if I say what everybody wants to hear, is high.
That's because they become religion and not science. For me, it's, if you think about it, maybe we part with that. The last thing that is supposed to, all those publications work on this system of peer review. People like you, scientists like you, some are more well-known, some are less well-known, will review your methodology, will review what you're doing, and they will attest that it is following guidelines, that it makes sense, that the results you got from the test that you did, make sense statistically. They will inquire on all that. The problem is, in my opinion, is that when you have peer reviewers that have an agenda to conform and they have a bias to say yes, they're not going to question why are you making this hypothesis, and are the things you're actually showing make sense and the methodology makes sense. And I think at the end of the day, what this guy in the YouTube that we saw has said is that he believes the problem that those things ended up being actually accepted into very well-known publications is
with high
this
impact factor
echo chamber of the same think tank that was totally fine and with some things, and there's a lot you need to watch this YouTube. They put some pointers, some thoughts that those people will not, because of mentioning those topics, they will not be able, because of their political beliefs or because of sense of belonging, they will not be able, because of that, to point against those publications. Yes. And they will go and say yes to posting it out just to support the agenda.
Yeah.
this is a cult or a religion and not science. So to believe in science, we need to restore the real peer review, which is coming unbiased. They need to be double-blinded, in my opinion.
From my perspective on this one is something else. So remember that people said, trust the science? And there was like this big thing in COVID saying, trust the science, trust the science.
I hate this. That's the main idea of science. If you trust the science, this is not science.
Yes. You need
Whatever
to trust,
the science of today is not true by definition of science.
Yes.
Science is us going and finding how whatever we believe today is maybe not true, how we can disprove it. That's science as we started.
Yep.
So like saying, trust the science, blindly trust the science. No. I mean, we've seen in COVID, things changed. Like you knew something about this, then it changed, then it evolved, and whatever we know about it today is completely different. There is no trust the science as if it's an ultimate thing.
It's a trust, but verify.
If you say trust the science, it's basically like trust God. You don't ask, you trust God. It's a religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Science is not a religion.
Yeah.
If science is your religion, you don't understand science. Period.
Yep. Because you always need to question, and you always need to show me the proof.
And the proof that you have today may be disproven when you have a new technology, when you have new understanding, when new things are being found. Whatever we know today is for sure not what we will know 10 years from now.
Yes. And the other thing that is important to understand is when you look at the publication, always ask who's funding it. Well, this is the main thing that I've learned.
That's the main thing in life. Always ask yourself who's benefiting.
Yes. So I think with that, the main reason that I wanted to have this conversation, besides all this, is to actually cue us up for the next talk, which talks about how to break myths. Because if we're talking about the myth of science and not asking questions, it's the same true when you're a security professional. You always need to ask yourself, is the paradigm that works now, is this the right paradigm?
Sure.
For example, you'll see that nobody ever likes to deal with data and identity. Nobody ever likes to deal with data and identity. DLP, everybody says, oh, DLP is dead.
Didi. Keep it for the next episode.
Yes, I know. But I'm queuing it up for the next time, is that eventually everybody wakes up and they discover that they need to deal with the things that they don't like.
I think with that, we will talk about it in the next episode when we get about talk again about some identity and security. But for now, as always, I hope you enjoyed our show. We want you to be inquisitive and ask questions
and challenge the paradigm.
Challenge the paradigm and never get things for granted. Don't take things for granted. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.